เสียงอะไรอีกแล้วเนี่ย
He's 30. He's 30-something years old. There is a great story about Alexander the Great, that he met the Indian armies of King Porus. You might have heard this, and he fought them, and they had elephants. The Indians fought with elephants, and the elephants made it very difficult to fight the Indians. But anyway, Alexander the Great, like usual, defeated them. And King Porus was a huge man, like 6'6" or something, very, very tall. And I guess Alexander the Great had him on the ground with a sword to his neck and said, shall I let you live? And they had this discussion, and Alexander the Great said, I'm going to let you live. And it's a great moment of relationship between two great warriors and two great leaders, King Porus and Alexander the Great, where Alexander lets him live instead of killing him. And Alexander the Great then goes back to Mesopotamia, where he dies at 33 years old, the same age that Jesus Christ died, 33 years old. So Alexander the Great dies very young, and then his empire is split into three parts. One part is taken by Ptolemy, and that becomes the Egyptian empire. Another part up where he was from, Macedonia, is taken by another general, and the other area is taken by another general. So the empire is taken into three parts. So instead of one kind of empire, you have three parts, and that becomes the Hellenistic world. And there's amazing places like Egypt, where the largest library existed on the planet Earth, where this beautiful lighthouse, this shining light for boats had existed, and very, very wealthy city, Alexandria of Egypt, a Greek city. I have no water. But I'm going to have to take a break here for a second. You guys can talk about what I've said so far.
เปิดซับยังไงอะ
ปิงไม่มาหรอวันนี้
มิงดุกเปิดซับยังไงอะ
ไปให้ร้านเปิดดิ
3 จุดอะไปตรงไหนต่อ
ไม่ต้องบอกมัน
3 จุดไหนต่อ
ก็ที่ร้านไงก็พาให้ย่าพาไปที่ร้านดิ
3 จุดไหนต่ออะฮัลโหลอันไหนต่อ3 จุดอะดุกเฮ้3 จุดไหนต่อทำไมไม่ยินเลย มันมีเป็นปากกากับเป็นอันเนี้ยอันไหนอ่ะ CC เลยวะมีแต่ CHA อ่ะอ๋อ CC แล้วก็อะไรอีกอะคิดว่า CHUT กับ C กับ PL อันนี้อะไรอ่ะมันฮัลโหลทำยังไงอ่ะ3 จุดแล้วไงต่ออ่ะ
วันนี้ร้านไม่น่าปิดนะบูมไปได้
มึงจะพูดอะไรให้มันแบบเป็นไปไม่ได้ไหมวะเขาให้กักตัวอยู่ไปได้ไงวะก็ตรงไหนอ่ะ
Okay, so
ปุ่มไหนดุ
we'll just leave Alexander the Great behind, but and his accomplishments, and then the Hellenistic world, which was for most people the most interesting, is the Hellenistic world. Why? Because they developed their own science. The knowledge became very developed. It was a great period of time, a couple hundred years. And then we have the rise of the Roman Empire. So the next thing I need to discuss here for the end here is to kind of try to give you a quick summary of the Roman Empire. And I'm going to break a couple times. I hope that you guys can. It sounds like Boom's the only person that talks. Too bad for you guys. But you guys should try to discuss it a little bit in Thai, what I'm talking about. Leaders like Jing and Ming and Ai-un, if you could lead some kind of discussion for a couple minutes, you can write down terms, like he is talking about the Roman Empire. And I'm going to give you a couple of very clear ideas. I hope that you'll understand the Roman Empire. So, I mean, the Roman Empire is the greatest empire that ever existed. The only other one is Chinese Empire. So, basically, it's the Chinese Empire and the Roman Empire. These incredibly developed, powerful, rich, extremely wealthy empires. But I didn't talk to you about the Chinese Empire. We just talked about the origins, the very beginning of China. Where here I need to, I'm finishing now with you. What we're doing is we're finishing the picture of the ancient world, the one that I can give you in 2 weeks, and it ends with the Roman Empire. So we call it the Roman Empire. The word empire is different than I've given to other countries. I've said the Indus Valley civilization, the Mesopotamian civilization, all these. Now we're saying the Roman Empire. So you should understand what the word empire means. You can write that down in your vocabulary. E-M-P-I-R-E, the empire. So the Roman Empire is, I'm going to click both of you guys off, Duke and Folk. I'm going to click you both out if you act like stupid dudes or listen, if you don't look like you're paying attention, I'm going to kick you off and you're done. Okay. Is that funny? Is that funny, Duke? Say, I don't waste time. Yeah, you do waste time. Okay. So if you think of it from the point of view of the end of the ancient world and you realize the word empire, E-M-P-I-R-E, P-I-R-E. Empire means you rule many different cultures, many different peoples, many different races, many different ethnicities, many different kinds of religions and everything. It's a completely diverse, complicated groups. It's not like one culture. An empire is not one culture. It's many cultures, but ruled by one power. And this is similar, really it's quite similar. Oh, I don't need to say that. Well, obviously the Khmer were the same. They ruled many different kinds of people in Southeast Asia through power. Obviously, the influence of Roman culture can also start to influence people, and that we see with the Germans. The German tribes were in the north. As the Roman Empire expanded and became bigger and bigger, the German tribes became more and more interested in fighting the Romans, and they were very powerful tribes. But they fought naked. They weren't civilized. They were tribal, and they literally didn't wear any clothes when they fought the Romans, who were in armor, iron armor. Now we've gone from bronze to iron. Iron is much stronger, like steel. So the Roman soldiers wore leather, steel armor to protect them from weapons. So they were an advanced army. So if we want to take the most basic picture to start with, is that we have this empire, E-M-P-I-R-E, and it has expanded all over the world. They rule the entire ancient world. The army, the military soldiers are so, they have this equipment. They have steel instead of bronze, which is softer, steel armor. They have steel swords and steel weapons, and they are a fierce army. The Romans are a fierce army at some point. So that's usually the picture that everyone has. Does everyone already have that picture of the Roman Empire already? Just a big army that is very big. None of you have any pictures of Rome. So let me just go back. Do you want to just talk about that for a second, Ching?
เข้าใจกันไหมอ่ะฮัลโหลไออุ่นเข้าใจอยู่ใช่ปะ
เข้าใจ
โตอะไรแบบนี้เข้าใจใช่ไหมอ่ะก็เดี๋ยวเราก็ไปอธิบายก็ได้ก็พูดถึงโรมนั่นแหละเฮเลนิสติกมันก็เป็นยุคหนึ่งอ่ะหลังจากอเล็กซานเดอร์ตอนที่เขาตายแล้วแบบว่าแบบอาณาจักรของเขามันก็แบบว่าแตกเป็น3 ส่วนแล้วก็เหมือนกับว่าก็ยึดครองไปเรื่อยๆเขาก็โรมก็เป็นแบบว่ามีชื่อเสียงเรื่องแบบกองทัพอะไรอย่างนี้ประมาณนั้น
Can you tell them about the empire? Can you define empire for them?
เข้าใจคำว่า empire ไหม empire ก็คืออาณาจักรนั่นแหละแบบสมัยก่อนมันก็เป็นแบบว่าถ้าเกิดยึดครองได้ก็กลายเป็นอาณาจักรของแบบในครอบครองอะไรอย่างนี้มันไม่ได้เรียกว่าอะไรมันไม่ได้เรียกเมืองอะไรพวกนี้เขาใช้คำว่า empire ลองไปเปิดดูก็ได้ถ้าเกิดใครอยาก
Okay. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of before how Rome developed. So Rome actually goes back to about the time when the Greeks are developing, really. And the first people that we know about are called the Etruscans, and I will write that down on my little timeline for you for the Romans. But the Etruscans are very interesting people, and they're not Romans. They were, probably numerous kingdoms on that peninsula of Italy, that area, geographical area, and out of that, then these people who were speaking Latin started to fight with the Etruscans, and so the Etruscans and the Romans had this kind of competition, but fundamentally the Etruscans were the rulers, and then the Romans defeated them finally. And you might have heard the myth Romulus and Remus, supposedly the two babies that are suckled by a wolf. Maybe your Waldorf teacher told you that. Did anyone hear the Romulus and Remus, the babies suckled by the wolf? Okay. And, that's usually the story that's told in 5th or 6th grade. 6th grade. So, Romulus kills his brother and takes over the kingdom eventually. And this is the beginning of the kingdoms. And so there are, again, kingdoms and kings in Rome. And then finally they develop a republic. And it means for the people. Res Republica is the Latin language of the Romans. It means for the people, but it's not really for the people because, obviously the people, they get to have a senate, like a group of men who are all landowners, who are all wealthy, who are, basically make decisions, so they're supposed to represent the people, but, they probably represent themselves more. But that's mostly how governments are. It's the rich people who run the governments. Rome was no different. And that then later kind of has problems, and then we move into this competition for power. But what Rome really does develop is its army. And what we can see is that there is a very important point in history, which I would like you guys to remember and know about. So what happens is that there's another civilization called Carthage, Carthage, Carthage. And Carthage is actually the Phoenicians, who were they were kind of like, my theory is that they're really like copycats of the Minoans. They're the people who imitated the Minoans. And what did they imitate? Well, they became great traders, and they used boats. So they had shipping vessels, a trading empire. Now, the Romans didn't have any boats, and they didn't have any ships. And what happened is one of Carthage's ships had a shipwreck, and the Romans took the ship, and we call it reverse engineering, meaning they took it apart carefully, and they figured out how it was built, and they began to copy that ship and make many of them. I want you guys to make sure you understand that. So the Romans fundamentally were evolving politically, at some point they developed themselves into a republic. That's important. REPUBLIC, a republic. That's important because that's what America is. America is a republic, a democratic republic. Rome was the first democratic republic. It's different than just a democracy, which no one's ever really had a democracy, honestly. That word is not understood. But Rome develops the first republic. It's very important for all history after that. So, but during this time, they found a ship by the Carthage, the Carthaginians, or the Carthage people, and they figured out how to make it by copying this ship. And that changed history completely. Okay, talk about that for a second. So they developed a republic, which is an evolution away from just being a king. You see how the evolution is, the way people look at it. There's a kingdom. There are many kingdoms. Each king is the king of his kingdom. Okay? The law is the king. If the king says yes, it's yes. If the king says no, it's no. That's a kingdom. A republic is when you have a group of people who all own land, and their sons own land, and they get together and they're the ones who decide the laws. It's called a senate, Senate, a senate. And those people all are, elected. They elect each other to be the group that makes the laws for the people to help run the society. That's called a republic. So it's not just one person, the king. It's a group of wealthy people, basically, most of the time. Then, during this time, as the armies are developing, the Roman armies are developing, they're fighting, they're becoming more powerful, they've taken over most of the land. They find a ship and they copy it. And that changes history forever. Can you share with them, Xing, Aiun, Ming, the points there?
อุ่น
ครูพูดถึงยุคเฮเลนิสติกที่มันต่อจากยุคของอเล็กซานเดอร์ใช่ไหมชิงเข้าใจถูกใช่ไหมแล้วก็เล่าเกี่ยวกับเรื่องเรมูลุสกับเรมุสที่เหมือนเป็นตำนานแบบเด็ก2 คนที่ถูกเลี้ยงโดยหมาป่าแล้วก็ก่อตั้งโรงแล้วก็ครูพูดถึงอีกอารยธรรมหนึ่งชื่อว่าคาเทจใช่ไหมอันนี้มันเหมือนแบบไอ้คนกลุ่มนี้เหมือนคล้ายๆกับมิโนอันนะคือมันเป็นอาณาจักรที่ทำการค้าขายแล้วก็เดินเรืออะไรอย่างเงี้ยซึ่งตอนนั้นโรมันแบบยังไม่เคยมีเรือไม่เคยเดินเรือเลยแล้วโรมันก็ไปเจอเรือของไอ้อาณาจักรเนี้ยแบบเหมือนจะล่มอยู่มั้งแล้วก็เรียนรู้ที่จะสร้างเรือก็เลยมีเรือใช้แล้วก็ชิงต่อได้ไหมเนี่ย
โลมเขาเหมือนกับว่าเป็นผู้ที่เหมือนแบบริเริ่มสร้างแบบใช้ระบบสาธารณรัฐนะคือริพับลิกคือสาธารณรัฐใช่คือก่อนหน้านี้สมัยก่อนแบบทุกเมืองมันก็จะเป็นแบบปกครองมีแบบเจ้าแบบเขาเรียกว่าอะไรคิงหมดเลยใช่ไหมแบบเป็นอาณาจักรเสร็จแล้วทีนี้โรมก็เริ่มแบบซีเนตก็คือสภาเขาก็แบบว่ามีสภาแล้วก็ให้ประชาชนเหมือนกับว่าเลือกคนที่จะมาบริหารอะไรเงี้ยก็แบบว่าคนที่จะมาแบบเขียนกฎหมายอะไรอย่างนี้ก็คือเป็นแบบผู้ที่เริ่มใช้ระบบสาธารณรัฐในสมัยนั้น
คุณต่อ
Okay.
คุณต่อ
Toto, you can add something, or Ming, you can add something if you have. So what I've said is basically we have the beginning, we have the development of the Roman Republic. They find a ship. They then become shipbuilders and they become seafaring peoples. And they decide that they're going to take over the Mediterranean. They're going to defeat Carthage. Now, this is serious because the Carthaginians have their empire all over the Mediterranean. They have huge outposts in northern Africa, in Tunisia, and all over Spain, everywhere. They were the major trade and seafaring empire. And the Romans decide this is what we're going to do. So they built ships and they began to fight the Carthaginians. And there were 3 wars, and they are very famous. There are books written about these wars, and this is this is written in Roman history. So this was written by the Romans about the Romans' history, and it's called the Punic Wars. Very important. You can look it up, and you can read it in Thai on any site. Punic, Punic Wars. So the Punic Wars between Rome and Carthage is very, very famous. And it's interesting because if the Romans had not defeated Carthage, they never could have become an empire the same way they did, because Carthage owned the Mediterranean. They had that under control. So Rome needed to expand. That's a very important word. Expansion. I'm gonna spell it. Put it in that's another word you need to put in your vocabulary. Expansion. 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 I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to say the word many times in the next half an hour. So what happens is that they build the ships, they become seafarers, and they begin to attack the Carthaginians. First, they attack Rhodes, which is the farthest island east. That's their big colony, the Carthaginian colony of Rhodes. They attack Rhodes, and they fight that. And then they also attack Sardinia, which is Sicily, which is another big island near Italy, Sardinia, and Corsica. So the 4 islands, I'll say them again. You can look them up. Rhodes, Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. Those 4 islands were Carthaginian, and they were main centers of trade and colonies of the Carthaginians. And the Romans fought the first Punic War, and took all of those away from Carthage. So Rhodes, Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica, the 4 islands all around Italy, were taken in the first Punic War, in which lasted a number of years, and many years. The war lasted many years, but the winners were Rome, and they took those islands. Now, one of the things that the Romans had done is they came up with this really great technology, and they had this board that they would let down onto the ships would come up next to each other in battle. And what the Romans did is they came up with this technology where they had this big board, and they put the board down when they got next to the ship. It was like a bridge. And when the bridge got down, all the Roman soldiers would run onto the other ship with their swords and their shields and go and fight on that ship. And it was an incredible, powerful tactic, because here the two ships are next to each other. And then the Romans put down this bridge that basically allows their soldiers all to run over onto the other ship. And there was nothing they could do. I mean, it was easy to defeat them that way. So the Romans defeated the Carthaginians by a certain kind of technology, a war technology. That's always what the Romans were good at, war. So then the Carthaginians say, well, this is not acceptable. And so they take the great, now this guy is considered very great, almost like Alexander the Great, but you'll see his end is quite different. His name is Hannibal, Hannabal, Hannibal, Hannibal, Hannibal. And Hannibal was given the job to take huge Carthaginian armies through Spain and attack Italy from the north and invade Rome, sack Rome. So he took all these elephants from Africa, and they took all these elephants across the Mediterranean Sea. Don't ask me how they did that. And they took all these elephants, and Hannibal fought with these elephants, and he took them. It's very famous. Hannibal took his armies over the Swiss Alp mountains. This is an amazing story. So they bring the elephants into Europe and Spain, and actually Hannibal was born in Spain, but he's Carthaginian, and he takes this huge army with these elephants and horses and everything and go over the mountains, the Alps, and they invade Italy from the north, and huge army. And the Romans lost. They lost, and they lost, and lost. And basically, Hannibal was going to defeat the Romans. And for some reason, this is really strange, and Hannibal's considered like the great genius of, a military genius, how to win wars. Some reason he decided not to invade Rome, the city, but stayed outside of Rome and ended up going south to try to defeat other cities first. And the Romans were able to get reorganized. And when he was coming north again, they attacked him and killed him. So that's the Second Punic War. So Punic War number 2. And then the Third Punic War, so Hannibal almost defeated the Romans on their own soil and in their own way, because of course, the Romans were first a land-based army. The Romans were always known to be very powerful on land. And then the Romans decided that they were going to pay back the Carthaginians for attacking them in their own homeland. And so they created a huge army of ships, a huge navy of ships, and they invaded Carthage, which was in northern Africa, where Tunchani is. They had a huge civilization there. And they defeated the Carthaginians in a terribly powerful way. I mean, they killed every single person or made them into slaves. They wiped the city off the map, is the way people say it. They literally destroyed everything. And the way people say it is Carthage was no more. So the Romans completely destroyed Carthage, the city place in northern Africa, and destroyed them, and therefore they were gone. So after that, Rome was then, that's the Third Punic War. So Carthage, anyway, you have three Punic Wars. I might have mixed them up a little bit, but anyway, there's three Punic Wars, and they're the wars between Rome and Carthage, and you can look them up, and you can have, I might post something on that if I can. It's too much for me to do, really. So anyway, then the Roman Empire now begins to expand. So the main principles, if you want to know the secret, the number one principle is that Rome started as a republic. You know, that's important to understand that. And it evolves later into something else, which I will tell you. So it starts as a republic, it gains power, defeats Carthage, and then it begins to really expand now. And now the wealth of Rome really begins to increase. You guys, can you make sure everyone understands that so far? Okay, it doesn't look like anyone understood it, so I'm going to keep going. So we go from the Republic, and then now we're in the defeat of the Carthaginians, and we move into the expansion phase. Now, I've got to tell you, folks, that the main things that made Rome interesting, obviously, is that number one, they developed a system of law, and they have the 12 tablets on bronze, which is very early on in the Republic, and that helps to establish the Republic, because you can't have a republic unless you have laws, laws that everyone follows, and that means the rich people follow it, and the poor people follow it, and all people follow it. Just because you're rich doesn't mean that the law doesn't apply to you. And obviously, there's a problem like Mexico and this country and many countries. You know, fundamentally, the law isn't the same for everybody, and therefore you don't have a republic. If the republic's based on the idea that there's law and order for everyone equally, and that there's some people that, you know, are not above. We say some people are not above the law. No one's above the law. Not even, not even the Senate, not even the government. No one. So this is a basic principle that at least was tried in Rome. And the other thing is they were incredible architects. So they basically copied the Greeks. And there was already a lot of Greek influence into the Etruscans. So if you go back before Rome, you have the Etruscans. You can see that the Greek colonies, the Greeks had spread out all through Italy and all around Sicily and Sardinia. And so the Greek influence was very, very strong on the Etruscan period. So the Greeks had already really influenced art, architecture, and other ways of thinking about, developing civilization. So the Greeks had already made their influence on the early Etruscans. The Romans continued, that development. And so the Romans had an incredible skill at building and their army. So they had their law, they had their skills at building and architecture, and they had their army. And this, honestly, is the basic aspect of what made Rome the great empire it was. It understood, and I'm going to give you the secret I think the secret of Rome. One was organization. They were able to organize themselves through engineering, they were very famous for having orators who would speak about the philosophy and the government in the Senate. So speaking, organizing, and then this building. They built beautiful cities. The Romans built beautiful places, and eventually they would build a road all over Europe. So even today, you can go to Europe and see the roads that the Romans built. You can go to Europe and see the aqueducts. They're all still there. There's bridges, there's roads, there's aqueducts. An aqueduct is what carries water. So what the Romans figured out was it's best to build like you should have the water flow in these aqueducts were built up in the air. And all the water would flow from a river source or a lake source, and they could have cities everywhere, not just along a river. So that was obviously another important invention. So their technology, their engineering, their ability to build cities, their ability to build cities anywhere because they figured out ways to, bring the water. They built roads. They just built all what we call infrastructure to create an empire. And of course, the word that I want you to understand is expansion. The basic principle of the empire from the very beginning, when it was still a republic, was expansion, expansion, expansion. In other words, grow, grow, grow. You're not just satisfied being, a little kingdom. You're going to conquer others. You're going to go out with your army and you're going to defeat others and you're going to take what they have and, you're going to govern them as a part. They're going to be Roman, not necessarily Roman citizens, but, citizens of the empire under Roman law. They're going to function under Roman law. So, this is what happens during the time of Jesus. Jesus is over there in Jerusalem or over there, and the Romans are there too. And when Jesus was about 33 years old, he had caused a lot of trouble because, he was saying things that were amazing. He was healing people from blindness. He was healing people from sickness. He said things, he told people that he was God, that I'm, one, I am one with the Father. I am one, I and the Father are one. And then finally, he raised someone from the dead, which the Jews saw, and they couldn't accept it. And no one had ever raised anyone from the dead before. And, many people didn't believe it. But the Jews freaked out, and they went to Pontius Pilate, who was the ruler of Judea, and they said, "This man has broken Jewish law." And the Romans said, "That's not a big problem for us. He has not broken Roman law." But the Jews said, no, you listen. He says he's God. He rose someone from the dead with some black magic. They thought it was magic, the devil, something very bad. And he's, healing the blind, and, he's telling all these things, and, we want to kill him. And he's broken our law. He's broken Jewish law. And Pontius Pilate says, well, I'm really sorry to tell you, but he has not broken Roman law, so I'm not going to do anything. So the Jewish leaders go back and they say, this is so terrible, because Rome was ruling the Jews. And then they go back again. They go, look at, he's dangerous. And Jesus is doing nothing. All that Jesus is doing is going around teaching people. And he has, he seems to have powers to heal people's sicknesses. And he did raise someone from the dead, according to the Bible. So finally, Pontius Pilate's wife, who thinks that it's important to keep the people happy, the Jews, Pontius Pilate's wife says, I think you should, do what the Jews say, because they're very unhappy and Jesus is causing trouble. And who is Jesus to us? I mean, he's not important to us. So Pontius Pilate, the ruler, he makes a big mistake, right? Instead of listening to Roman law, which is what he's supposed to do, which means Jesus has not committed a crime, he decides to he decides that he's going to follow Jewish law and condemn Jesus to death. So the Roman leader, Pontius Pilate, condemns Jesus to death with Jewish law in the Roman place of Jerusalem. Strange. And Jesus dies, and the rest is the story I will tell you next year of Christianity. But the Romans were there. And so the Roman Empire goes all the way to Britain. It went all the way to the border of Scotland. The one place they never got was Ireland. Ireland remained completely independent of the Roman Empire. Much later, there would be an emperor at the end of the Roman Empire named Hadrian, and he would build a grand wall from east to west on the island of on the British island, and he built it east-west, completely across, and it's called Hadrian's Wall. You can go see it if you like. Hadrian, Hadrian's Wall. And he built the wall so that he could he wanted to show the limits of the Roman Empire. And he wanted to have a line, like a border, between what was Roman and what was, these other tribes in Britain. In that case, it was the Picts. The Scottish people were called the Picts. So he created a border called Hadrian's Wall. That was much later, and that story I'm not going to tell because we don't have time. So I'm going to go back, and I'm just going to say that I'm just going to tell you the story then back up to Adrian. Fundamentally, what happens is that the Republic fails, and Julius Caesar is able to take control of the country. And when Julius Caesar takes control of the country, he is so popular. His armies love him. He's the one who has fought in the Gaulish Wars, so he subdued all of Europe. All of Europe is Roman, and he is very popular amongst the people and the soldiers. But the Senate, not so sure about him. Well, Julius Caesar comes back. He has to fight a civil war because many people are against him, basically his rivals. And he defeats his rivals in a civil war, and he becomes the dictator for life. In other words, he becomes the ruler of Rome until he dies. And then what happens is that there's a group of people who are in the Senate. They decide that they don't like him, and they kill him. Each of them stab him 2 or 3 times with a knife so that they're all guilty. All these men stabbed him with knives and killed Julius Caesar. And he was still probably in his 50s. So he wasn't too old. But this was going to end up being the way Rome would go. Rome gave up on being a republic. It ended up having this Senate, which is always the rich guys, taking care of themselves. And then you had this new kind of emperor called a Caesar. So basically the Caesar was a kind of evolution from Julius Caesar. And then after Julius Caesar died, there was Augustus, Caesar Augustus, who was probably the most famous and is the most loved of all of the Caesars. Caesar Augustus, who was actually a nephew of Julius Caesar, and he had selected him as his heir to the throne. So Augustus Caesar has lots of problems, but one thing famous about Augustus Caesar is that he was in a group called the Triumvirate with Mark Antony, and Mark Antony ended up falling in love with Cleopatra, the queen of Egypt, and Mark Antony was so mesmerized by Cleopatra that she had convinced him that they could become the rulers of Rome, the rulers of the ancient world. This is a very strange, interesting story that I don't have any time to tell you, but Cleopatra somehow convinced Mark Antony that they could be the rulers of the world. And Mark Antony fell for it, and later Mark Antony had to be killed by Augustus Caesar. And of course, the story is Augustus Caesar became the emperor of Rome and the Roman Empire. And then there were many, many different emperors after him. One thing famous about the emperors is that there were very, very bad ones. There are ones that are so bad that if I asked you guys, if I told you the stories of the bad ones, and I asked you again, like what you think is evil, you would know that the evil exists in Roman emperors. Everyone who studies Rome finds out that there were really evil people who ruled Rome. But there were 5 good ones later. And that was Hadrian. So you can also, I might list them out for you, the 5 good emperors. And the last of the good emperors was Marcus Aurelius. And Marcus Aurelius is also famous because he was a great philosopher. And he wrote a book called Meditations that is still read today. So if you go to school or if you go to a library and you want to learn something about Roman philosophy, the first book you'll see is Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. And he was a Stoic philosopher, so it was a certain style of philosophy. He had a very difficult time because the whole time that he ruled, they were fighting the German tribes. So what happens is basically there's 2 big problems. There are the Persians, called the Parthians, and the Germanic peoples. Okay? Germania. So the Germanic tribes and the Persians, both sides of the empire. One is north of Rome, the other one is east of Rome. They're constantly having problems with these peoples. They constantly have to go to war with them. They constantly have to fight wars, and etc. So it's a never-ending war. The Roman Empire is kind of a place where there was lots of war most of the time. But there was a thing called Roman peace, and that came with what they call Pax Romana, means Roman peace. And the leader, one of the great leaders of that was Hadrian. And so, I don't have much time left, but I can say that if I was going to tell you one emperor
ไม่ได้ยิน
that I'm interested in,
เข้าร่วมแล้วแต่เราไม่เข้าแล้ว
I would say Hadrian is one. And let me tell you why I think Hadrian is interesting. He comes very late. So he lives, not very late. He comes after Julius Caesar, well into the what we call the absolute dictators of Rome. But Hadrian, his idea was Rome does not need to expand anymore. No more expansion. So he made a peace with everybody. He did a peace with the Persians, the Parthians, and he did he wanted to do peace in the north as well with the Germans. And so I think his vision of peace and a Rome that didn't have to expand all the time was probably a good idea. Now, what makes him special? Well, I'm going to tell you. Hadrian loved Greek philosophy. And Hadrian loved to study. Besides being an emperor, he wasn't a big soldier. He wasn't a soldier. He was a philosopher. And he eventually, of course, was a ruler of the army. All the emperors are rulers of the army. But he was never a soldier from the beginning. So he was trained in Greek philosophy. His mother, his predecessor wife, Plotina, Trajan's wife, she was also very interested in Greek philosophy. So there was this interest in philosophy, which is something more than just killing people and power and expansion and greed, you see. So there was something good in Hadrian, influenced by the wife of Trajan, Plotina. And so there was something philosophical, the idea that there's goodness in the world and that goodness can bring more goodness. And so people...
เสียงครูหายหรือเปล่า
ใช่ใช่หาย
ใช่ใช่
John can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so we're almost finished, but what I want to end with is that the Emperor Hadrian was influenced by Greek philosophy, and the secret of Greek philosophy is that the good is real. The good is the only thing that's real, and that we must always try to make the good real in life. And so everything moves towards the good, whether it wants to or not, eventually. And what wisdom is, to be wise, is to follow the good, is to move always in the direction of the good. And so I think that probably is good enough for us, for this class, to end on the idea of the Greek philosophy idea of the good. And you write it with a capital T, capital THE, the, capital GOOD, the good. And if I can leave you with anything, I will leave you with that. And I think it helps you understand that there was an evolution, there was development, there was the great Greek inspiration of philosophy, which for Chalmers is the most important thing out of Western civilization. I even believe that technology comes from the idea of the good. You get that, class? Really, technology comes from the good. Yes. The only problem is that if you don't understand the good and you give up yourself to technology and do not use it as a tool, but you allow it to take away something from who you are, then you will get lost in it. So that's Chalmers' teaching. But, you know, I'm talking about today, right now, what I would tell young people, what I tell my daughters. Technology is just a tool. Use it as a tool and it's good. Let it become more than a tool and it's bad. Period. Use it as a tool, it is good. Lose control of yourself and let technology take over your mind, and it is bad for you. Period. And if you don't agree, that's okay. And other people don't agree, I don't care. It doesn't matter. They have their own life to live. But what I've taught you in this class is that civilizations come and they go. They rise and they fall. And that what I tried to say to you is that Western civilization actually started with a great, what the Western civilization that you and I are a part of actually started with philosophy. And that philosophy was Greek philosophy. And that philosophy was the philosophy of good. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice weekend. I will post stuff. You will have work you will have some stuff to do. I don't need the books on Monday, so don't worry about it. You don't have to give me the books on Monday. Just do your work the best you can. Who knows? We might have another class. You never know these days. But I wish you all the well. If you guys get overwhelmed, talk to the leaders. If you're feeling you're confused or you think you have too much work, talk to the leaders and they can talk to me. The main thing is I just want, one page on every subject that shows me some understanding. Okay, some drawings for every civilization. I will set you an outline that you can give to everybody. So I'm going to make it easy. I have no interest in giving you lots and lots of work. I just want you to try to understand how important it is to understand the meaning of civilizations. I hope that I was able to give that to you. Look on the board. Leaders will be in contact. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. John. Bye bye.
You're welcome.